What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Outpost, and in today's adventure, we will be counting down the top 20 oldest coasters I've ridden. My coaster count is currently at 259, and I've been lucky in my travels to experience some of the tallest, fastest, and longest coasters in the world. But what about those last remaining windows into our past that show us just how far we've come in terms of coaster technology? The oldest of the old. The aging veterans that have managed to cling to life after almost a century in operation. From wood to steel, East Coast to West Coast, let's dive in and see just how far into the past I've managed to conquer. At number 20 is the 43-year-old Schwarzkopf looping coaster, SooperDooperLooper, at Hershey Park. The first steel looping coaster to ever grace the East Coast, and a milestone coaster for myself, as it was only the second coaster I ever rode with a loop in it. Laser at Dorney Park was the first. But SooperDooperLooper in particular helped put me on this coaster-loving path, as right from SDL, I tore a path straight to Great Bear and never looked back. At 19 is the 44-year-old Arrow Looper Python, once located at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. Python has the distinct honor of being the only coaster on this list no longer in operation, and another in a long list of Arrow coasters biting the dust. But once upon a time, Python was the belle of the ball, being Busch Gardens' first roller coaster in the park, thrilling millions with its compact layout and double corkscrew element. Though it gave its last rides on Halloween 2006 to make way for its Jungala section in the park. At number 18, we have the 44-year-old Corkscrew, an Arrow looper that debuted at Cedar Point in 1976 and was the first coaster in the world with 3 inversions, a record it would hold till 1980 before being outdone by Demon at Great America. It's easy to take Corkscrew for granted these days, as it is completely overshadowed in its own park by new monstrous thrills, but Corkscrew manages to remain relevant with a gorgeous setting and an iconic finale over the Midway. Even if most Arrow loopers have long outstayed their welcome, it's always a pleasing sight to see Corkscrew still chugging along over the Midway every summer. At number 17 is the 45-year-old Arrow family coaster, Space Mountain, at the Magic Kingdom Park in Walt Disney World. The OG of Space Mountains and the oldest operating coaster in Florida, Space Mountain is an indoor high-speed thrill ride that continues to deliver a frenzied ride through pitch darkness. Its dual-track and epic soundtrack make it a highly sought-after ride to this day. Originally created after the success of Disneyland's Matterhorn, technology and money kept the ride from becoming a reality until the success of Disney World in the 1970s. With an influx of funds and a technological boom in their midst, they returned to their plans for Space Mountain after nixing a replica of the Matterhorn for the Magic Kingdom. It was the first coaster I ever braved as a kid, and I continue to be in love with it all these years later. At number 16 is the 45-year-old PTC wooden racing coaster, Racer 75 at King's Dominion. Though once upon a time it operated under the moniker Rebel Yell, which is what it was called when I first rode it. It was only recently in 2018 that the name changed, dropping its Confederate name for a more friendly tone to go along with its racing layout. It took its design from its sister, the Racer at Kings Island, and along with its sister also starred in a movie, coincidentally named Rollercoaster. Look it up if you haven't seen it. It's hilariously bad.
Tonight might be the night he turns this carnival into a graveyard.
At number 15 is the 46-year-old Arrow Mine Train Trailblazer at Hershey Park. As you can see from this list, Arrow absolutely dominated the 70s with its compact looping coasters and steel mine trains. Trailblazer is the second oldest coaster in the park, trailing behind another coaster we'll meet later in this list. It's a nice little family coaster, Trailblazer, nestled in the trees, that has since grown in popularity for me for the epic encounters where its track intersects with that of Stormrunner. Surprise, surprise! At number 14 is another Arrow mine train, the 46-year-old Runaway Mine Train at Six Flags Great Adventure, my home park. It was the park's first steel coaster, and you sure can feel it taking some of those turns. But with a scenic finale over the lake and rustic layout through the trees, there is still life to be mined out of this mine train yet. Keep those mine trains a comin'. At number 13 is the 47-year-old mine train coaster Carolina Goldrusher at Carowinds. One of only 2 rides left that were open on opening day. It was also the park's first roller coaster, and it's incredible to see how far we've come, seeing Goldrusher and Fury 325 in the same park. I love walking through a park and getting to enjoy history right before your eyes, and Carowinds is most certainly a rich history. Back on the Woody train for number 12, it's the 48-year-old racing coaster The Racer at Kings Island. The ride made its debut at the park in 1972 and put the park on the map thanks in part to its spotlight in an episode of The Brady Bunch. The ride is most known for playing a vital role in the coaster renaissance of the 1970s. The ride managed to coax its designer, John C. Allen, out of retirement to try and outdo another popular attraction at Coney Island, Shooting Star. And seeing as how that ride is no longer with us, I'd say he stuck the landing. Number 11 is another PTC Woody, the 48-year-old kiddie coaster Woodstock's Express at Kings Island. A ride I knew as Beastie when I rode it, and another coaster that opened with the park in 1972. A simple out and back layout is all there is to this ride, but it's one that manages to thrill young riders looking to take their first steps into the roller coaster world. I should know, I was one of them, and Beastie did its job to perfection, putting me on the path that led me to where I am today in my coaster riding glory. Kicking off our top 10 is another Arrow mine train, the 49-year-old Goldrusher at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Another ride that opened up with the park in 1971, and while Arrow Loopers may be a dying star, mine trains are living large, thanks to their tame ride experience and family thrills. And Goldrusher is no exception, with a slow, lumbering layout around the top of the mountain that gives great views of Full Throttle. We've come to the end of our Arrow Mine Train expedition with number 9, the 51-year-old Cedar Creek Mine Ride at Cedar Point, the second oldest coaster still in operation at the park. And following the success of the Matterhorn at Disney, Arrow's tubular steel track design was in high demand at amusement parks around the world. This led to Arrow designing what we know today as the Runaway Mine Train, and as seen by this list, many of them are still in operation today. Cedar Creek Mine Train opened as the centerpiece of the new Frontier Town section of the park, and even though it's been overshadowed by 2 gargantuan thrill machines, the legacy of this ride lives on, with a slightly painful ride that gives gorgeous views of the lake upon which it rides and the nearby Top Thrill Dragster. At the other end of the park is the oldest coaster still in operation at Cedar Point today, and our number 8 pick. It's the 56-year-old wooden PTC coaster, Blue Streak. When this ride opened to the public in 1964, it had been 10 years since Cedar Point had a roller coaster. The success of this out-and-back Woody led to the rebirth of coasters at Cedar Point, with Cedar Creek Mine Ride, Corkscrew, and Gemini helping initiate Cedar Point's love for building the biggest, fastest, and craziest coasters on the planet at their time. The coaster is named after the local high school athletics team and remains a prominent fixture on the Golden Ticket Awards to this day. Number 7 is the ride that started it all for steel coasters. It's the 61-year-old Matterhorn bobsleds at Disneyland. Modeled after the Matterhorn mountain in the Alps, this was the first continuous coaster to utilize tubular steel tracks, and it's amazing to see how this coaster came to be. When the park opened, the area was first designed for picnicking and was dubbed Holiday Hill, but it wasn't long before pernicious teenagers took to the hill at night for a spot of necking, much to Disney's dismay. It was in 1956 that Disney conceived of the idea for a toboggan ride on that plot of land. Though his original idea called for real snow, the idea was vehemently objected to by Disneyland construction chief Joe Fowler. And the real snow never came to fruition, but the Matterhorn became perhaps the quintessential ride of Disneyland to this day. Number 6 is the 74-year-old PTC wooden coaster, the Comet at Hershey Park. a ride which replaced Hershey's original Wildcat coaster. It was also Milton Hershey's last purchased ride before his death in 1945. And with a double out and back layout and a smooth ride experience, Comet continues to be one of the most popular attractions in Hershey Park. And now its popularity may be bigger than ever with the epic views and interactions with the neighboring Sky Rush. Number 5 is the 79-year-old wooden coaster manufactured by Joseph E. Drambor, Thunderbolt, at Six Flags New England. It's the oldest coaster in New England and the oldest operating coaster in any Six Flags park. The plans for the ride were purchased at the 1939 World's Fair, and it originally operated under the name Cyclone until it was renamed Thunderbolt in 1964. It sports a traditional figure-8 layout and is a member of the Aced Coaster Landmark. However, that doesn't stop this septuagenarian from being one hell of a brutal ride. Number 4 is the 93-year-old PTC coaster Wildcat at Lake Compounds, a brutally painful ride that truly wears its age on its sleeve. It's one of the oldest coasters still in operation at its original location. It has been retracked, retrained, painted, and refurnished so many times over the years, but that doesn't stop this almost a century-old coaster from doing all it can to break you. This ace landmark is, however, worth the ride for its history alone. To put into perspective just how old this and the next 3 coasters are, they were all built before the Great Depression. Not only that, but infamous Old West lawman Wyatt Earp was still alive. At number 3 sits the 93-year-old wooden coaster, the Cyclone, at Coney Island. Probably the most famous old coaster out there. So much so that it's been designated as a National Historic Landmark. Designed by Vernon Keenan, this compact twister was so popular that it's been replicated at parks around the country, most notably Viper at Great America, Cyclone at Magic Mountain, and Georgia Cyclone at Over Georgia, though only Viper continues to operate today. Again, to put into perspective just how old this coaster is, aviator Charles Lindbergh has ridden it, claiming the experience to be greater than flying an airplane at top speed. Number 2 is the 95-year-old wooden coaster Giant Dipper at Belmont Park. Another historical landmark, this coaster found itself in development in part to attract visitors and residents to Mission Beach. A gambit that paid off, as almost a century later, this coaster is still providing thrills to millions. It's a rough ride, but that's to be expected after near a century. But what's amazing is just how little that roughness dampens the ride. Sure, it's rough, but I've ridden so many more worse coasters more than half its age. So whatever you're doing, Dipper, keep it up. And finally, our number 1. The oldest coaster left on this earth that I have experienced, and it is none other than the 96-year-old PTC wooden coaster, Thunderhawk, located at Dorney Park. The oldest operating coaster in the Cedar Fair chain, it originally operated as the coaster, and it wasn't until the year of my birth in 1989 that it was renamed Thunderhawk with the addition of the now defunct Hercules nearby. I've had so many memories on this coaster since I was a kid, with the craziest being stuck at the top of the lift hill for 20 minutes with my mom when I was only about 10, and freaking out. And when the ride finally got going again, a man's wallet in the front row became loose and $20 bills started flying towards the back of the train. Suffice to say, I made out like a bandit that day. But Thunderhawk remains today as a classic example of early wooden roller coasters and how far we've come in the decades since. It is set to become an ace landmark in 2020, and deservedly so. And that's our show. It has certainly been a whirlwind century for roller coasters, as we've evolved from simple out-and-back layouts to insane speed machines with death-defying inversions and gimmicks, from dive coasters to fourth-dimensional coasters. It will be amazing to see where the next 100 years will take us. Guys, thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment down below. I want to hear the oldest coasters you've ridden, and be sure to hit that thumbs up button. I appreciate all the support, and until next time, adventure on.